Let me, at the beginning of this meeting, welcome all of you. Today, we are going to deal with verbs and verb phrases. We will discuss the classes of verbs, which are the lexical verbs and the auxiliary verbs. And we will also distinguish between finite and non-finite verbs. Let's get started. Classes of verbs. In English, we have two major classes of verbs. They are, number one, lexical verbs, number two, auxiliary verbs. Let's start with lexical verbs. What is a lexical verb? A lexical verb is a main or a content verb. It is a verb which has meaning in itself. For example, walk, eat, and read are lexical verbs. However, an auxiliary verb is a verb which does not have a specific meaning in itself. It cannot stand alone as a complete verb in a sentence. In fact, it has a grammatical function which is usually of great importance. Let's consider this example. He has written a letter. The auxiliary verb has does not have a specific meaning. It rather has a grammatical function which indicates that the action has been done and completed, and mostly a short time ago. Besides, a lexical verb is a phrase which consists at least of a lexical verb which can be preceded by one or more than one auxiliary. The lexical verb is always the final constituent in a verb phrase. Examples. Number one, I write a letter every day. Number two, I am writing a letter now. Number three, I have been writing a letter since 8 a.m. Number four, she may have been writing a letter now. As we can see, a lexical verb can consist of just one word, as it is in the case in sentence number one, where we just have the word write. Or it can consist of two, three, or even four words. Look at sentence number four. The verb phrase consists of four words, which are may, have, been, and writing. Classes of auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are subdivided into two classes, which are A. Primary auxiliaries, B. Have and do. B. Modal auxiliaries, will, would, can, could, shall, should, may, might, etc. Functions of auxiliaries. Let's start with the verb be. It has two main functions in the verb phrase. A. It is used with the ing participle to form progressive verb phrases. Example, I am writing. Number two, they are writing. Number three, she was writing. B. It is used with the en participle to form passive verb phrases. Examples, number one, the letter was written. Number two, the book will be published. Have. It combines with the en participle to form perfective verb phrases. Examples. Number one, I have given a lecture. Number two, we had written the essay. Be and have can be used in one verb phrase. This combination is possible in these cases. Number one, perfective and progressive verb phrases, present and past. Examples. A. I have been swimming. B. She had been swimming. Number two, perfective and progressive passive verb phrases, present and past. A. It has been being written. B. It had been being written. Number three, do. Functions of the auxiliary verb do. As an auxiliary verb, do has the following functions. Number one, negation. John doesn't like French. Number two, interrogation. Does John like French? Number three, the two processes together. That is negation and interrogation. Doesn't John like French? Number four, emphasis. Paul does sleep early. Number two, I did send the message. Number five, code. In this case, the verb do is used in place of a verb or a verb phrase to avoid repetition. For example, A, she likes apples and so does Henry. B, have and do as lexical verbs. We should remember that the verbs be, have, and do can function as lexical verbs. Look at the following examples. A, I do my homework every day. B, Mary is a teacher. C, John has a new car. Modal auxiliaries. Now let's talk about modal auxiliaries. As we have mentioned earlier, modal auxiliaries don't have meanings in themselves. They rather have grammatical functions. They are usually referred to as function or structure words. By the way, their grammatical functions are of great significance. Following are some examples of modal auxiliaries: will, would, can, could, may, might, etc. Syntactic characteristics of auxiliaries. Auxiliaries have 4 characteristics. They are the following. Number 1, negation. Example, I don't like smoking. Number 2, inversion. Does she sleep early? Number 3, code. He attended the lecture and so did Jane. Number 4, emphasis. I do know the answer. Lexical verbs, forms and functions. As we have said earlier, lexical verbs are those verbs which have specific meanings. Now, what are the forms of a lexical verb? A normal English verb has 5 forms. They are, number 1, base. For example, write. I write a letter every day. Number 2, the S form, writes. She writes a letter every day. Number 3, past, wrote. He wrote a letter yesterday. Number 4, ing participle, writing. They are writing English now. Number 5, en participle, written. They have written a letter. Finite and non-finite verbs. Finite verbs. The S form and the past are always finite. Examples. A, she goes to bed early every day. B, she went to bed late last night. Non-finite verbs. The ing participle and the en participle are always non-finite. For example, it's wrong to say A, she writing a letter. B, she written a letter. Finite and non-finite. The base form of the verb can be both finite and non-finite. Examples. I write a letter every day. B, Jane wants to write a letter. C, Jane wanted to write a letter. In English, it's wrong to say Jane to write some letters. By the end of this meeting, let me sum up the most important points we have discussed today. We have talked about the major classes of verbs. There are lexical verbs which have specific meanings such as walk, read, sleep, etc. There are also auxiliary verbs, and those are divided into 2 categories, which are primary auxiliaries and modal auxiliaries. In English, there are 3 primary auxiliaries which are be, have, and do. And we have discussed their various functions. We have also pointed out that these primary auxiliaries can be used as lexical verbs with specific meanings. Furthermore, we have talked about modal auxiliaries such as may, might, will, would, etc. That's it for today. I hope that you have benefited from this meeting. Looking forward to seeing you in the next meeting. Goodbye.